chairman of committees. Out of that 26 minutes that I have, I will speak for 20 minutes. Please stop me at 20 minutes. The balance 6 minutes will be taken by Honorable Govindam Karunakaran. I am glad that both ministers whose ministries are being discussed at this committee today are present in the chambers: Port, Shipping and Aviation, and Justice, Constitutional Affairs and Prison Reforms. I have seen a report that Sri Lankan Airlines in the first half of the financial year 22-23 had lost 112.8 billion rupees. That's losses made in the first half of the financial year of 22-23. Now, that includes the forex losses also. Nevertheless, that's a staggering figure, and that every month we keep making these losses and the state absorbs this. I'm mentioning the figure because the cost of having an election is only 11 billion. And whenever we talk about an election, the defense is taken, how can we afford an election? 1 month's loss of Sri Lankan Airlines is more than the cost of having an election. So, that is not an argument. You keep making these losses and then you say, how can we hold an election? Fundamental to the functioning of a democracy is periodic elections. One might say, well, the parliament has a mandate for 5 years. Why are you asking for an election now? I wish to draw the attention of both honorable ministers today. By your own very conduct, you conceded to the country that this parliament had lost its mandate. Few months ago, both of you crossed the floor. Both of you crossed the floor and came and sat in the opposition. You conceded that the parliament had lost its mandate. The election that gave a near two-thirds majority to the government at that time was lost. Subsequently, you were both given ministerial portfolio and you have crossed back to the government side, taken that cabinet post, and you are both in the front row now. The Honourable Minister for Justice, Constitutional Affairs and Prison Reforms made a very strange speech today, just before me, if I might call it that. You might as well made that speech sitting in the opposition. You sounded very much like an opposition MP, complaining bitterly about the corruption that is rampant and the fact that all these persons who are corrupt, businessmen included, are protected by politicians. Now it's rich coming from a minister who holds the portfolio of justice to be complaining about that. To complain about that is our task. Your task is not to keep complaining about that. Your task is to remedy that, to put it right. Now I know that this is not something that can be done in a day. You might say, well, I have only taken on this portfolio not even a few months, and so on. But this is this is endemic. This has gone on for so many years. And Honorable Minister of Justice has been on this side and that side, and then this side and then that side, then again on this side and then again on that side. I have lost count of the number of times that you have crossed this floor ever since you entered Parliament first. I don't know whether you have a record of the number of times that you have crossed the floor.
Honorable member, that you must remember, I crossed the floor twice, every time that I went from the government side to the opposition. But at the moment, I am holding this portfolio. I have been elected from the party which has been ruled today. And that I have got the mandate from the people in the Colombo district. And therefore, that remember that I have never crossed the floor just to get anything or to get the power. Always I have crossed to the opposition by opposing to the policy of the particular government, whatever the government was.
The point that I was making was whether you remember the number of times that you crossed. You did not answer that. Perhaps you yourself have lost count of the number of times that you crossed the floor. This time you crossed from the opposition to the government side. Your last crossing was towards the government side. Right? Now I'm not complaining. No, you came to the opposition, you sat here a few months ago with us, and then you crossed over again. Right? So that's the only point. Nothing more. I'm not deriding you. I'm just saying you may not even remember the number of times that you crossed the floor. That's all. Now, the task that you have undertaken, we understand, is an enormous task. It's not an easy one. But it is not your lot to complain to this House. Your task is to put all this right. And there are several bills that after you took over as the minister, we appreciate several bills that you have forwarded to this House, making amendments, new acts of Parliament and so on. But some of those, we have raised our concerns, like the fact that under the Opium and Dangerous Drugs Ordinance, the bail application is now moved from the High Court to the Court of Appeal. The question of access to justice, and that is something that you need to put right. Perhaps it was there in the draft when you took over as minister. Several of these drafts we find were done before you took over as Minister of Justice, and those are just being churned out like a factory, like in a factory floor, and being produced here and being tabled, some of which will not fit in with the legal culture of our country and so on. I understand that there is a registration of deeds, Register of Title Act, that will impinge on prescription. Now, prescription is a mode of acquisition. It comes from the Roman Dutch law. It has a fundamental principle that nobody actually absolutely owns a property. If you don't use it, if you don't derive from it, then somebody else can take it over a long period of time, of 10 years. But title registration now comes in, and if it is registered, then I am told prescription will not apply. Now, those run counter to some basic principles. I'm just raising it. I don't want you to respond, Honorable Minister, but some of these things we'll have to have a closer look before we make them into laws and trumpet to the country and elsewhere that a lot of reforms are being made. You're also Minister for Constitutional Affairs, and the President has now, for the umpteenth time, I heard him 2 days ago, say that before 75th anniversary of our independence, the national question of this country will be solved. Not only does he say that, he says that if it is not solved before that date, it will never be solved. And that's a prophet of doom, as it were, but he says that. So, the primary responsibility, if I might call it, in this House to carry that through rests on your shoulders as a minister who holds that portfolio. And as I have said it in this House, while the President was present, I wish to repeat it, that as for ourselves, we will cooperate with whatever genuine effort that is taken. And that is the reason why we have continued to sound positive, although we have serious doubts in our minds. We don't want to be blamed by you saying, well, we were ready to do it, but the Tamil side, raised various issues. They were not willing to do it. No, we are ready. But it must meet with the just aspirations of our people. You know what it is. We have said it very clearly. We have said that it must be meaningful scheme of devolution to the Northeast on a federal structure. I have said this once before, recently in this house. Federalism is not a bad word. There are many countries in the world, indeed, the strongest countries in the world have a federal structure. Federal idea was introduced into this country by none other than the founder of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, SWRD Bandaranaike, in 1926. The Kandyan chiefs wanted federalism into 3 units in this country. It was the Sinhala leaders who wanted it. They couldn't have wanted something that was bad for the Sinhalese people. So this bogey of saying federal will divide the country, cannot continue any further. Persons like you, learned in the law, must tell the people the truth, that there is absolutely no danger of the country dividing because we share power in a meaningful way under a federal structure. Unless we do that, we will continue to have this wound festering. I'm borrowing again from the phrase that the President used on the 3rd of this month. We are willing to come to a settlement that will be good for not just our people, but good for the country. This is the moment to do it. This is the moment to put lots of things right. Because we are in this economic crisis, I agree with you entirely that the big fraudsters must be brought to book. But those are not done merely by passing laws. There are some things that are fundamentally flawed in this country. It has ingrained into the system, so much so that if a deal is being made, some contract is being given, percentages are already allocated. 5% for the minister, you must be knowing this. So much for the ministry secretary, so much for somebody else. All of that is it's established, systemized. The systemized corruption is very, very difficult to eradicate. That is why the youth of this country are saying system change. Now that system change has to do both with the political culture as with the culture of corruption in this country. And until we strike at that root, and it'll hurt us somewhat when we do that, we won't put it right. And I think the time has come. We have declared our country bankrupt. We have gone through 3 decades of war. At least now, if we are not willing to strike at that root and turn it upside down, country will never resuscitate from the coma that it has got into. So, as you said, this is the only time you have gone in the other direction. We appreciate that you have taken on a responsibility, a most difficult responsibility at a most difficult time. But that enormous responsibility must be carried out. Now, we in the opposition have a function. We in the opposition have the function of supporting you in every positive step that you take. That's a responsible opposition. And we will play that role. You know that very well. We will play that role. But equally, we have an enormous responsibility to oppose, to make plain to the country, to announce and call out the government if the government is on a wrong path. Now, after these several months of this new government, most of us are not in a position, if I speak the truth, not in a position to pull our full weight with this government. It has to do with the fact that you, on your side, still have people whose hands are sullied, who everyone knows are corrupt, and you are carrying on regardless. If the president and you think that you can somehow balance these matters and carry on and get away, you are sadly mistaken. It will not happen unless that fundamental change is made, unless the government and everyone here comes to the realization that we must start anew. Nothing is going to change. But the forces of evil that have gripped this country are far too strong to be balanced. It has to be eradicated. So all the racist elements, the corrupt elements, all of that have to be totally eradicated. You can't leave some of them and work with the others and hope that this is politics. We can manage the two, we can somehow get across. No, that won't work. Therefore, Honorable Ministers, I urge you, I urge you, please, as two ministers who left the government ranks and crossed the floor, recognizing that the government had lost its mandate, now you have gone back, taken ministerial portfolio, but as those who recognize that there is no mandate for this government, you must also support the view that the parliament has lost its mandate and that with a fresh mandate, with a fresh outlook from what the people ask for, that fundamental system change only, we can come out of this mess that the country has got into. And fundamental to that is the national question, and repeatedly ad nauseum we are saying, because we want the country to hear, we want the world to hear, that we will cooperate on that, not to just cover up and hope that things are balanced. No, to do the right thing properly, make that fundamental change, share power in a meaningful way under a federal structure, then you have not only just our support, you will have the support of the entire world to change this country around. I must thank the Honourable Minister for Port Shipping and Aviation for reducing the airport tax for Palali Airport by half. That has enabled, I believe, the first flight to now arrive on the 12th of this month. I urge him to actually take away the airport tax in toto. We'll have more tourists coming. We will have foreign exchange that we badly need. It was an important move to have done in September 19, to have declared Palali Airport and the Batiklo Airport as international airports together with Ratmalana Airport. That must come into effect. Both Palali Airport and the Batiklo Airport must receive foreign tourists and others who will bring much needed exchange to our country. I'm saying specifically those two airports because linguistically It will attract Tamil-speaking people from South India, from Malaysia, from Singapore, from various other parts of the world. Take that.
කරුමන්ත්‍රීතුමා කාලය අවසන් වෙනවා.
And so, my appeal to the minister is to relax that balance airport tax also and enable economic recovery through that process too. Thank you.